Welcome to Lecture 1 of Week 5. This is our last week of regular lectures. Let's dive right into it. So this first reading on consumer goods is really flipping the consumption-production process. Most scholarship on sports fan consumption analyzes it in terms of the consumption being the end point of the process. So everything else leading up to it is production of the spectacle, production of all of the elements that are sort of surrounding the arena, inside the arena, and then the consumption, the act of consumption, is sort of the final step in the process. This reading, though, sort of flips that. So starting with consumption as kind of a new beginning. So as the sports fan consumes something, they take it, they make it their own, and it's actually the start of another process. And this process is really sort of a never-ending cycle of production and consumption. So the sports fan consumes the spectacle, consumes the food and beverage and all the other experiences, the buying sports fan memorabilia and apparel and all that stuff. And that's really they're consuming it, but it's really a cycle of production because they take that experience, that material, and they reuse it in a new production process, producing identity, producing sociality with other fans, with family members. So they're taking this sort of produced good, but treating it as sort of a raw good that they're then manipulating on their own and as a part of their own production, their identity production, or their sort of social identity production. So all of this is predicated with the sort of central underlying premise of us living in a consumer society. And a consumer society carries with it sort of the basic tenet that society and institutions of society are doing more than simply fulfilling the needs of society in our capitalist structure through the sociocultural system, branding, culture, celebrity culture. Consumer society is really built on creating needs and wants, not just filling or fulfilling what we need, but creating a sense of need. If you just think about sort of the ad industry as a whole, it's built around creating a desire, creating a need inside the person for something. So we don't really need the new pair of shoes or the new car or the new anything for the most part. But the ad industry and our culture sort of creates this desire to want more, always want something new, something better. So that's really the starting premise of this article's argument. And sports consumers are no different, and the sports ad industry is no different. So creating a need and a desire to always be consuming more. Oh, there's a slight difference in the jersey this year, so you have to go out and buy a new jersey to showcase your fandom. Or there's a new luxury suite area that's being renovated or developed. So the sort of the best fans or the wealthiest fans will be able to show themselves off by buying those seats, those luxury seats. So there's always something new or something bigger or something more expensive that's sort of built into our consumer society. And again, sports is really no different. And the idea here is that fans are buying their identity of sports fans. They buy or consume in order to be sports fans, which is an interesting way to think about it, that you aren't just a fan sort of internally, that you have to continually showcase it by purchasing things or consuming things in order to sort of keep your street cred as a sports fan. And when we think back to sort of the inside out or the outside in versions of identity, this is very much one that is identity is based on the actions that you do rather than being some sort of innate internal system that governs your actions. Fandom in this case is a creation by all the things that you are purchasing and consuming and the activities that you're doing. And in doing all of those things, you are showcasing that you are a fan. So I'd just like to take a quick moment to do your first discussion item of this week. I'd like you to respond to that idea. Do we have to buy sports things or buy experiences in order to produce our social identity of a fan and to produce that sort of fandom identity? Can you be a fan without buying sports things? sort of the consumption part of it. Please discuss your answer, whether it is yes, you can be a fan without buying things, or no, you can't be a fan without buying or consuming things. Whatever the answer is, discuss what that answer is. And on the other side, we've already discussed how it's viewed by someone who simply tries to buy their way into a community or a group with sort of ready-made, off-the-rack, all right, I want to make it look like I'm a real outdoorsy person, so I head to whatever sporting goods store, Dick's or anywhere else, and buy maybe a Cabela's and buy a bunch of camo and buy a bunch of sort of outdoor gear, maybe hiking gear, whatever it might be. But it isn't sort of a true or a genuine identity. We've already discussed that. Discuss how those two would work together, or maybe work the relationship between those two, of sort of having to buy something to be a sports fan, but it's more than just buying things to show that you're a sports fan. Discuss the relationship between those two, and that's the fourth item within this first discussion item. So take a minute or two, hop over to your discussion posts, and then come back for the rest of the lecture. So again, this reading views consumption as sort of a necessary component of being a sports fan, but they are also saying that consumption is really just the beginning. So sure, we do buy things, we consume, but then we take those things and we make them our own. So this would be, yes, a Detroit Lions fan might go out and buy a Lions flag, and that is an act of consumption. But that fan might create a tradition about always raising that Lion flag every Sunday or every game day at the same time, and all his neighbors know it and his family knows it. So then it's sort of making it his own through his own social acts, his own performances. Or a group of friends always getting together to watch every Celtics playoff game at their local favorite pub. Or a pair of siblings paging through their hundreds of baseball card collection, or their hundreds of baseball cards, their collections, looking through them together over and over again. Yes, purchasing the cards was an act of consumption, but they're really making their own sort of social connection or relationship connections through the use of those materials. So it isn't just an end point at the act of consumption. They're taking them and making them something new. Or a small group of patrons in a diner talking about the hopes of the next year's New York Jets team. Again, they may purchase season tickets, or they may be wearing Jets apparel. So they have those moments of consumption, but they really take that fandom and then they're making sort of a social connection or a community connection based on that consumption. So again, the consumption is really just a starting point for fans rather than it being the end point in the process. And then once that sort of consumption happens, and then the ownership gets taken, sort of control of the ownership of the consumed product, or of sort of the moment. Once the fans themselves take ownership of that through the reproduction, they really claim control over it to some extent. Yes, they did buy the thing from the Jets organization or from the NFL, through other companies that are involved with the production of the materials, but ownership of the meaning is what fans are taking control of. So they may buy the uniforms or the flags or whatever other paraphernalia that they may purchase, but once they sort of repurpose those for their own social life, for their own identity presentations, they're taking ownership of the meaning of it. And that's what this reading was talking about, in sort of the reproduction of the system and ownership, and how it sort of changes throughout the process. It's really ownership of meaning. Generally speaking, fans sort of, once they take that ownership of it, they are recreating meanings that are already sort of in play by that hyper-consumption behaviors of buying more and more and more. Rarely do they take a product and recreate meaning so that they're moving away from this sort of capitalist hyper-consumption type of process. But they do have the opportunity to sort of reshape meanings as they are, after they consume a product and then are reproducing identity or social interaction or community, whatever they might be using that product for. That's where they're changing the potentially changing meanings and values and behaviors moving forward. That's what the reading was talking about with ownership. And that's it for this lecture. Feel free to move on to lectures 2 through 4.